Okay, so we're at 10:20 now, so I'm going to begin. There's lots of other sessions as was noted. I think there's definitely people are there's lots of other reasons to go to other events. But it'd be useful if people could close the door. Michael, could you just close the door so it's easier to hear? So I do want to first thank the sponsors and the organizers for this event. This is it's an important issue to get people together in person and to talk about and learn from each other about how we use the software, how we work in a community. I just want to note that this is. I also want to thank you for being my initial presentation around using the software that are built using AI to create this presentation. So it's always nice to go off and have some guinea pigs, and you were it. My name is Mike Gifford. I'm a Drupal core accessibility maintainer. For 21 years, I ran a business here in Ottawa called Open Concept and was one of the founders of Ottawa's Drupal community. I'm also a W3C invited expert and work on both the accessible roles and responsibilities mapping, which is an accessibility process which is efforts to try and break up WCAG into something that's more legible, as well as the web sustainability guidelines, trying to help people understand the nature of the environmental impact of our technology. So I'm going to be talking about digital sovereignty and infrastructure, and I think that's something that doesn't necessarily capture a lot of people right off the bat, but it's something that I think is quite important, and that is growing. There's growing awareness about the need for this. So, how many people have heard about, challenges in the United States around governance? And there's a few people who've been heard some controversy of stuff that's happening down there. And how many people here there was a court case a while back where the French Microsoft was presenting to the French courts or the French government about whose law is supreme when it comes to sovereignty, and the Microsoft admitted on stage that ultimately it's the U.S. law that takes precedence over French law. So that was certainly an issue. There's been other issues too, where governments have had their emails stopped because of potentially because of orders from the U.S. government. So there's a lot of reasons why sovereignty is becoming a real issue. How many people here are involved in the government technology sector in one way or the other? Okay, quite a few people. That's sort of what I thought. So I'll be touching on a few different issues here, but it's I think that it lines up. My talk is going to line up in some ways with what Rod's talk was, in that it's about incentives. How do we structure the incentives so that Canada is able to go off and have an opportunity to have a space in a global marketplace? And how do we drive more people to Drupal and open source communities so that we can continue to do that? So, yes. So, I first want to go off and highlight that Drupal is solving more than what is generally recognized, and this is useful for a range of different reasons. For when you're looking at publishing at scale, Drupal does it really well. Accessibility, security, that's something that's quite important. Trying to provide multilingual delivery, also quite important for government, but also incredibly complex workflows. It's important that you have a strong, consistent open source license area with leverage. That there's an ecosystem of people around this. If there was only one company that was responsible for delivering Drupal, it would be a less strong contender for implementation on any scale, because you still have a critical weak point or failing point for users. If you have the if there's one company that gets to make the choice about where the future of the software goes, even if it's open source, even if you can't fork it, it's a lot less. It's a lot less. You have a lot less rights and opportunities than if you have a lot of different vendors who are trying to provide a multipolar governance structure like the Drupal Association provides in order to ensure that the best ideas get in, not just the ideas that benefit the biggest player in the open source ecosystem. You also want to have something that is globally maintained and not something that is specifically built in Canada, because technology is global. There's very few technologies that are built in a country, unless you're a country like China or the United States, that has a big enough economy to sustain it. You generally need to have scale, and Canada just doesn't have that scale. But it is also useful to go off and see that this is technology that can be built and maintained locally. So that there are local developers here who've contributed all kinds of great stuff. So it was lovely to go off and have that introduction from Matt from Codefronts. And I think it's again, we've seen what the kind of contribution that people have given upstream to the Drupal community and shared with the rest of the world. Drupal is also, in times of turbulence, a very stable, it's a stable interface. So when you're looking at incorporating AI, if you're able to go off and have an element of it, a pillar of your AI strategy that is tied to something you already know and has already been incorporated in your department, you're going to have a much easier way to go off and to implement it, because you're not going to have to relearn everything. There's a strong community that you can build on. There's documentation, and there's things that we don't even necessarily think about when we're looking at AI and ways with which AI, which is again another giant disruption in our time, how do we incorporate that in our infrastructure? And Drupal's been really thinking ahead and advancing things like RDFA is a semantic framework for document metadata that's been part of Drupal for I think since Drupal 7. Like that, a vision of an open web and that open collaboration has been something that Drupal has been building for an awfully long time. And again, when you're looking at building on Rod's talk from earlier, if you have that ability to learn from each other and be able to have that documentation, AI can ingest that, and you can more quickly get to the right answer. Drupal also has an API first infrastructure, which is very well suited for AI. So there's well-structured content, extensible modules, and it's almost like Dries was expecting this to be something that AI was going to building Drupal for AI. Not that he did, but it would be it does play very nicely with the kinds of infrastructure that Drupal needs, or that AI needs. And Drupal is brilliantly boring, which is something that government needs to aspire to. Like, you don't hear that often about Drupal sites crashing and government sites being taken down. And there's the only instance I know of that the government of Canada had a Drupal embarrassment was with CSIS, with intelligencematters.ca. This is at least 10 years ago. They didn't bother to upgrade it from Drupal 5, and I kept wondering, is this a honeypot or what is this? And it was when it got hit by a Viagra attack, and there was Viagra and Cialis advertising on the intelligencematters.ca website. That's when they said, "Oh, we better upgrade this from Drupal 5," and we were involved in the process of upgrading that. This was definitely an entertaining process of that's as close I think we've had to a Drupal embarrassment in the 15 or so years that Drupal's been involved in delivering government websites, let alone other major websites in Canada and around the world. So it isn't just, having a strong foundation is really useful for independence. So it's not just about the code. The code is good, we like the code, but again, there's multiple providers, there's a vibrant ecosystem both in Canada and internationally. There's there's consistency from a legal perspective. So because everything on Drupal.org is under the GPL, you're not having to worry about licensing issues that maybe there's going to be some sort of conflict about the intellectual property of the tools that you're using. Having that consistency, I think, is also really important for any large-scale effort to build sovereignty in our communities. There's also lots of hosting options. You can host it on your own. You can put it on one of the big cloud providers. There's lots of places to do that. There's also the opportunity to have like a continuity of workflow. Like, yeah, Drupal 4.5, which is when I started, is a lot different than Drupal 11 or what I'm working with Core right now. But there's lots of ways that it's also ultimately the same. Like, it looks a bit different, but it is, a lot of the ideas there's continuity between those ideas. Having that history, so you know that it's been around for a long time. It's not like Drupal is not a fad. It's been around long enough that people can look at it and invest in it. There's also, as much as there are contractors out there who you can work with, it's useful to be able to have the flexibility to be able to hire internally as well. And to know that you can take somebody who has experience in web development and you can bring them up to be a Drupal developer or a themer. Like, you can help them come into the stack, because that is an option for organizations to look at as well. And this is also helping to go off and reduce the overall cost of ownership of the technology. So when you're looking at Drupal and AI, again, Rod touched on a bit of this beforehand. Summarization, translation, content generation, search, new accessibility improvements. Just like AI provides the opportunity to rapidly speed up deployment, which is another good thing. It also, when tying with you can use Drupal for like a Swiss Army knife for many different things. Back in the day when buy and sell was a Drupal site, it was basically it was using the APIs to be able to pull in data sources from various other places within government and present it largely as a presentation layer. But this is something that you can do to incorporate it and bring in external pieces of data and be able to have that be expressed as an ongoing. You can have that be easily available for your database or your processing, because you can use different data sources quite easily. We also have the choice of many different models, and there's the hope of building sort of an agentic CMS, and there's a large community of people looking to do that. I don't know how accurate the speech to text is here. I can't exactly look at that. So far, when my testing on my own, it works fairly well. This is a browser-based speech-to-text tool that I was able to go off and configure with this open source slide presentation, so that it can be accessible for those people who who have hearing challenges. So I think that there's another challenge with the risk of proprietary integration, and it's been interesting in the government of Canada has talked a lot about data sovereignty and the idea of having residency, making sure the data is on servers that are in Canada. This is an idea from a bygone era that really no longer. I mean, it's not bad to have servers in Canada, but it's not like the RCMP can come along to the server and inspect the servers and be able to give some sort of analysis about where your data lies or what's happened to that. That happens at a software level, and we have to be thinking about that risk. And I think that if you have, when you're choosing AI, if you have a single provider, then that is a single point of failure, and you're not in a position where you're providing them with a vendor lock-in. Now, there are ways to make these more interoperable or to build an abstraction layer, so you're not necessarily as susceptible to the whims of a particular vendor. Maybe even offering access to more than one, so that you have the ability to choose from them. But we do need to be able to start having for decision making that independent validation, because AI is powerful, but we have to trust and verify. The last part is really the most important part, is the trust but verify. So we are in the middle of an AI hype cycle. I don't have mathematical proof that there will be AI bust, but it seems incredibly unlikely that there is not going to be an AI bust at some point that will suddenly require us to pay the prices of the actual cost of the technology we're consuming. So we may be only paying $30 a month right now for AI. If you've got that deal, that's great. But we can expect that we're going to be charging a lot more for that, because there's been so much venture capital put into this technology that it's going to be something that we should expect to pay a lot more than we are very soon. And how do we try and build our systems now, not assuming that the costs are as cheap as they are now, but that we're able to go off and to accommodate a much higher price when suddenly we're paying the real costs of this technology, which are significant. Just even looking at the data centers alone, it's a significant cost to our communities, to the environment, and to our pocketbooks. We're looking at having these huge investments. So it's also worthwhile to note that even ChatGPT 5.5 came out recently, I think, and there's a Claude 4.7. Like, there's these different versions. Well, what are the kinds of answers you get, even jumping between versions? How do you compare what the answers you had yesterday with 4.6 versus today with 4.7? Like, there's no easy way to go and provide that comparison unless you completely rerun the test with both systems of AI. Because these are black boxes, it's much more difficult to go off and audit the results you're getting, other than, oh, the latest version, of course, is going to be the best version because it's the latest version, right? But that's not auditing. It's a wing and a prayer. And then this is just like with proprietary technology, that if you we have had this sort of sense that we've been told that proprietary software is secure because they have people to take care of that. But that's again a wing and a prayer kind of approach. And we know more and more that isn't the case, that security, privacy, a lot of our assumptions about what these big companies are doing with our data is inaccurate, and that we haven't been holding them to account for the things that for the use of our data in the direction of our technology. So yeah, Drupal allows AI flexibility. We should be looking at choosing this for, looking for ways to choose between large language models and small language models, mixing proprietary and open source AI where possible. There's definitely good reasons to use these giant large language models. For some of the reasoning, for some of the analysis they do, they are the tool to do that, but they aren't necessarily the tool to do everything with. And how do we have more control over the training data and the training weights so that we're able to have results that reflect the needs of Canada, not just the needs of the providers of this AI. We also want to have that flexibility to deploy it wherever we need to deploy it, and also to think about, like, can we start building our technology so that it's grid aware, that we're building, we're executing the heavy compute when it's cheaper or when it's more environmentally friendly, and not just whenever we push submit. So platforms are much like constitutions. And it's even worse than just the technology itself. I think that there are ways with which the technology is buttressed by other social constructs that are part of this. So it was interesting being in Estonia a little while ago and just last year, and looking at what they've been able to achieve with the X-roads, with their digital identity, with like, you can get married and I think divorced online now. So you can't do everything, but it's almost all government services can be done online. And it's just, they were able to, because they couldn't afford Microsoft services, they were able to go off and build, using open source from scratch, and take their idea of what a digital society would look like and be able to implement it in that space. Whereas in most Western countries that can afford to buy Microsoft, a lot of the implementations sort of look like the same kind of implementations. There is a a sameness to it, because Deloitte, KPMG, and others have been reselling the same ideas from one government to the next. So, and once these organizations become embedded, then it's very difficult to go off and to start thinking outside of that box. And there's a huge limitation about what we can do. Can we share the work? Like that basic element of this is what we've done, what we've built with Adobe AEM. Like the government of Canada spent over $1 million trying to improve accessibility in Adobe AEM. What happened to that technology? What happened to that in implementation? Was there any effort to go out and say, this needs to be shared with the world? This is something that needs to be at least improve the AEM community, if not the broader population. It's like, well, no. So I think there's also things around intellectual property rights and contract rights, and also that silo mentality that so many large organizations have. And that's not just government, but a lot of organizations have a silo mentality that stops them from sharing. If you're interested, there's an interesting group that's largely in the US called Inner Source Commons that's looking at how to often encourage collaboration within large organizations, because sharing is a real challenge, even if you're not talking about doing it in public on GitHub. Are people here with this, familiar with this quote, code is law? Oops, that says code is law, there we go. So this is from Lawrence Lessig, who is a lawyer in the US that helped found the Creative Commons organization. And I think once we allow information to get into code, it becomes the process of law. And with AI, that just makes it even more so. It becomes the policy or action or implementations. So, the most of the control right now does reside with U.S. federal government agencies, and that's a bit of a problem. We should be able to go into whether that's the infrastructure, the software, the patents, the roadmap. Those are not things that are controlled by Canadians. The government of Canada spent $1 billion buying Office 365 products and delivering it across for the 250,000 Canadians. Who knows whether that was a good deal or not? But if you're going to spend $1 billion, you know accessibility is going to be a priority. You should be able to go off and say, we want to have an accessibility checker in Microsoft Office that is the same quality as your grammar checker and your spell checker. We want it to be a first-class member of the what we can access for Microsoft Office, and not an add-on feature you have to dig for in order to go to check for accessibility. Now that may have been changed. It's been quite a while since I've used Microsoft Office products, but it's again, we should be in the driver's seat where we can. We're not a large country, but we're a member of the G7. We're a significant middle power, and we should be playing that role. So the governance of software almost entirely is residing outside of Canada. So we don't really have sovereignty over our digital lives. And that is definitely the case for the government of Canada, but it's also the case for most of our big corporations, because so many people look at what the government has done and then follows that example. We're not looking at what's happening in Europe and what's happening in other places where it's like, maybe we shouldn't trust these big American companies for all of our big IT situations. And I think that it is. We have enough evidence now, after 3 or 4 decades of digital, that we can say that whoever controls digital is going to have a great deal of control over the future, and AI is going to accelerate all of that. So I talked a bit about digital sovereignty to this talk, again, I think it's our focus has been on data sovereignty, on owning AI ownership, and I think that the ownership piece is also something that is frustrating. I think Canada is interested in investing in AI startups, and that's great. But if they're investing in proprietary AI tools, what we know in the past is that most successful businesses in Canada, if their value it comes from intellectual property, then at some point a bigger player, mostly American, will come in and buy them out. Now that hasn't happened with Shopify, and I'm not claiming that open concept, my business was bought out because of intellectual property, because it was all open source. But there is a challenge of assuming that if you invest in small businesses, that knowledge and that information and that intellectual property will stay in Canada. So much of the time it will not, because it will be bought out by an American or European company, and then the intellectual property and the value of that Canada invested in will go with that purchase, and often at a devalued price. I don't think that the government of Canada is getting good value for their money on investments in proprietary projects, and AI is a huge one in this case, because again, we're not necessarily big enough to build our own AI platforms, but we should be big enough to go off and to work with some of the biggest players in the world who are working on open source platforms, that are collaborating together, that are finding ways to go off and to better support indigenous languages, to better support the cultural issues, to provide contextual information that is relevant to Canadians, but we're right now focusing on things that do not allow us to go off and to control our future in many ways, because it's we don't have control over the software. I wanted to talk a little bit about small language models, because I think that is in many ways the future. All of the big tech pros are pushing the large language models and having one tool that can solve them all. But I don't think that's going to necessarily. I think we're going to more and more need an orchestration of small, specifically designed tools to go and help us implement AI. Things that are domain specific, that are auditable. The ability to go off and to have that cross-training between models to learn from each other, to be able to find what actually works to help us evaluate them in a way that gives our organizations control over their future. That allows us to have a local development. Like, it doesn't need to be locally hosted, but it should be able to be locally hosted. And you're not going to easily find a locally hosted implementation of most of the big cloud providers. We need to be able to have that collaboration and that knowledge sharing that makes sure that we're able to work with some of the biggest and best players in the world, but also to keep innovation happening and driving in Canada, so that we're not losing that to whoever's able to go off and offer the biggest salary or the biggest buyout to the companies that are involved. So I've gone to FOSDEM a number of times in the last few years. Have people heard about FOSDEM? So FOSDEM is a giant open source event, and this past year there was a Drupal for Government focus that happened just before FOSDEM. I was able to speak at both FOSDEM and at the Drupal event beforehand. And there's really quite a lot of excitement around open source and innovation that's happening in Europe. There was presentations at the EU Parliament. There's initiatives around. If people heard about the Germany Sovereign Tech Alliance, so Germany is investing hundreds of millions of euros in open source tools. And they're doing this partly because they want to jump-frog over the technology problems, or over the American providers, and find alternatives. And they see open source as being a critical part of this. That open source is part of the vast majority of software out there. Most proprietary software, like 80 or 90% of proprietary software, uses open source within it. If you're driving a car that has software in it, it's using open source software. There's a fascinating presentation from Daniel, I forget what Daniel's last name is, but he's the guy behind curl, which is a command line tool that's used on it's used on Mars. And hearing sort of the kinds of feedback and the involvement that he's on, and the number of cars that are using his software, and yet the number of people that contribute back to his work are negligible. but it runs a critical part of our infrastructure, not just in cars, but in all of our computers. It's shaping the infrastructure. It's trying to go and shape the incentives so that that open source isn't just the free option. It's an option